Tell me you love me only, and that you'll always let it be me, and that you'll always let it be me.
Good morning. My name is Kara Corbin Lickford, and it is my privilege to serve as your worship associate today. The theme for September has been reverence, and today we will honor one of the most beloved hymns of Unitarian Universalism, Spirit of Life, written by Carolyn McDaid, which describes a pathway to cultivating the virtue of reverence day by day. I did not grow up singing this song or other hymns that we frequently sing here in this congregation. I attended a Quaker church with my parents and grandparents and loved accompanying the hymns and singing in the choir. I am not a great singer, but singing and playing songs can be a very moving and even spiritual experience. There are still hymns from my Quaker church that make me emotional when I hear them. They usually remind me of my grandmother, my mother. I can say now that Spirit of Life is one of those for me now. We come together in community, supporting and encouraging each other on our spiritual journeys, affirming the importance not only of tolerance, but of acceptance, compassion, and open-mindedness. Welcome to Tapestry, a Unitarian Universalist congregation.
Your body is welcomed here. All of it. Yes, even that part. And that part, and yes, even that part. The parts you love and the parts you don't. For in this place, we come with all of who we are, all of who we have been, and all that we are going to be. Our bodies are constantly changing. Cells die and cells are reborn. We respond to infections and disease. Sometimes we can divorce them from our bodies, and other times they become a permanent part of us. Your body and all that is within it, both wanted and unwanted, has a place here. Our bodies join in a web of co-creation, created and creating, constantly changing us. Scarred and tattooed, tense and relaxed, diseased and cured, unfamiliar and intimate. Formed in infinite diversity of creation, your body is welcome here. All of it. This is our time to be together as one body, worshiping together. Welcome to Tapestry, all of you. Would you stand if you're comfortable doing so and join in singing our opening hymn, Spirit of Life. It's number 123 in your hymnals. And we'll sing this twice, particularly since we're going to be talking a lot about it today. As we gather together as a community to worship, we pause every Sunday to bring into our room the joys and the sorrows that affect our lives in the wider world. Some of us do that by lighting a candle in silent recognition of those sorrows and celebrations, and some have a short message to share. I have a few this morning to share with you. Connie asks, please send some positive energy into the universe for my former co-worker, Robert Burke. He and his teenage boys lost their home and all their belongings in a condo fire in Irvine last week. He's a single dad and has already had a number of challenges in his life, so this is particularly difficult. We will definitely hold him in our thoughts. And I got an email from the Jajilkos to ask that we remember Richard Jajilko's aunt, Helen Petrie, who died this week in Chicago at the age of 97. And finally, a message from Nikki Rinderer, who we're very glad to have back. She says, as many of you know, I've been in Montana the last 9 weeks helping my friend of 37 years, Ray, who had brain cancer, and his wife, Pat, with caregiving. Ray died a week ago in his sleep and at home. We celebrated his life in a wonderful service last Monday. I'm now very glad to be back here with you today. We're glad to have you back. And we'll remember these joys and sorrows and reach out as the time is appropriate. Would you join me in reading our congregational response, please? For your joys, we join you in celebration. For your sorrows and concerns, may you feel our compassion. For all that is spoken and unspoken, may the caring of our beloved community sustain you. And I have a story for our young or young at heart, if you want to join me up here on the carpet. We've got a small crew today. Well, some people are missing out on a really great story. So this is called Frederick. I've read it here before, but I wanted to read it again because it relates to the sermon that I'm giving later, and it relates to the fall. I don't know if you've noticed, but the days are getting much shorter, and unless you slept in, it was pretty chilly this morning when I was walking my dog. So this is Frederick, the little mouse. It is scalding out there now, but it was cold this morning. All along the meadow where the cows grazed and the horses ran, there was an old stone wall. In that wall, not far from the barn and the granary, a chatty family of field mice had their home. But the farmers had moved away, and the barn was abandoned, and the granary stood empty. And since winter was not so far off, the little mice began to gather corn and nuts and wheat and straw. They all worked day and night, except for Frederick. Frederick, why don't you work? They asked. I do work, said Frederick. I gather sun rays for the cold, dark winter days. And when they saw Frederick sitting there staring at the meadow, they said, and now, Frederick? He said, I gather colors, for the winter is gray. And once Frederick seemed half asleep. Are you dreaming, Frederick? They asked. But Frederick said, oh no, I'm gathering words. For winter days are long and many, and we'll run out of things to say. The winter days came, and when the first snow fell, the 5 little mice took to their hideout in the stones. In the beginning, there was lots to eat, and the mice told stories of foolish foxes and silly cats, and they were a happy family. But little by little, they had nibbled up most of the nuts and berries. The straw was gone, and the corn was only a memory. It was cold in the wall, and no one felt like chatting. But then they remembered what Frederick had said about sun rays and colors and words. "What about your supplies, Frederick?" they asked. "Close your eyes," Frederick said, and he climbed on a big stone. "Now I send you the rays of the sun. Do you feel how their golden glow?" And as Frederick spoke of the sun, the little 4 mice began to feel warmer. Was it Frederick's voice? Was it magic? "And how about the colors, Frederick?" they asked anxiously. "Now close your eyes again," Frederick said. And when he told them of the blue periwinkles and the red poppies and the yellow wheat and the green leaves of the berry bush, they saw the colors as clearly as if they had been painted in their minds. And the words, Frederick. So Frederick cleared his throat and he waited a moment, and then he said, as if from a stage, he said, "Who scatters snowflakes? Who melts the ice? Who spoils the weather? Who makes it nice? Who grows the 4-leaf clovers in June? Who dims the daylight? Who lights the moon? 4 little field mice who live in the sky. 4 little field mice like you and I. One is the spring mouse who turns on the showers. Then comes the summer who paints in the flowers. The fall mouse is next with walnuts and wheat. The winter is last with little cold feet. Aren't we lucky the seasons are 4? Think of a year with 1 less or 1 more." When Frederick had finished, they all applauded. "But Frederick," they said, "you're a poet." Frederick blushed, took a bow, and said shyly, "I know it." So there ends our story about Frederick the Mouse and this time of fall. So we'll see you guys in a little bit after your class. This morning's reading comes from Gordon B. McKeeman. It's titled, "How Does One Address a Mystery?" How does one address a mystery? Cautiously. Let us go cautiously, then, to the end of our certainty, to the boundary of all we know, to the rim of uncertainty, to the perimeter of the unknown which surrounds us. Reverently. Let us go with a sense of awe, a feeling of approaching the powerful holy whose lightning slashes the sky, whose persistence splits concrete with green sprouts, whose miracles are present in every place and moment. Hopefully, out of our need for wholeness in our own lives, the reconciliation of mind and heart, the conjunction of reason and passion, the intersection of the timeless with time. We go quietly, for no words will explain the inarticulate or summon the presence that is always present, even when our absence. But what shall I say? Anything. Any anger, any hope, any fear, any joy, any request, any word that comes from the depth of being addressed to being itself. Or perhaps nothing. no complaint, no request, no entreaty, no thanksgiving, no praise, no blame, no pretense of knowing or of not knowing. Simply to be in the intimate presence of mystery, unashamed, unadorned, unafraid. And at the end say, Amen. Here ends our reading.
My blood doth rise in the roots of yon oak. Her sap doth run in my veins. Boundless my soul like the open sky, where the stars forever have lain. Where the stars, where the stars, where the stars forever have lain. My hand holds the weaving of time without end. My sight as deep as the sea. Beating my heart sounds the measures of old that loves eternity. That of love, that of love, that of love's eternity. I feel the tides as they answer the moon, rushing on a far distant sand. Bringing my song is the wind of my breath, and the love blows over the land. And my love, and my love, and my love blows over the land. My foot carries days of the old into new. Our dreaming shows us the way. Wondrous our faith settles deep in the earth, rising green to bring a new day. Rising green, rising green, rising green to bring the new day.
Let us join in a short time of silent meditation. If you would sit back in a comfort of your seat, take a few deep breaths, and let us be together in silence. Namaste. Amen, and blessed be. Our theme here at Tapestry for September's worship service has been reverence. And without a doubt, the piece of Unitarian Universalist writing that speaks most eloquently to the topic of reverence is that hymn, Spirit of Life, that we sang earlier. It may be the most well-known hymn in our tradition. Some congregations sing it every Sunday as a response to their time of meditation. We don't sing it as much here because I have sung it so much, so I don't put it in the order of service very often. But I fell in love with it again this week, partly because of the content of the hymn itself, and partly because of what I learned about how it came into being and the woman who created it, Carolyn McDade. You might have noticed that the closing hymn is also by her, as well as the special music that we just heard was also by Carolyn. And last week, those of you who were here witnessed our beloved ritual of water communion. Well, that was her idea too. In 1980, Carolyn McDade conceived of this water ceremony as a way of bringing back women activists who had been doing their work all across the country. And each woman brought a jar of water from the place where she lived, and during the ceremony poured it into a bowl, naming what made it precious to her, and then dipping her hands into the water that they'd combined. Each blessed the woman next to her, imparting strength to continue her work at home. Now, more than a songwriter and a worship leader, Carolyn McDade has been an activist most of her life. She has actively opposed wars, South African apartheid, U.S. foreign policy, and nuclear power. She's worked for economic justice and environmental protection and the rights of women and migrant workers and prisoners and refugees. Her music is just a component of her commitment to justice. And the beauty of her work comes out of her personal expression of love and justice. This is one of the reasons that I think Spirit of Life is so moving and so popular to us. It's a deeply personal prayer. It's not grandiose, and we have a lot of hymns that are all about community and saving the world. But this hymn is an individual, very intimate prayer. Now, as we talk about reverence and celebrating beautiful songs, I want you to remember that this song is just an example of one person's faith. Now, singing the songs of other people and reading their words can be incredibly inspiring. But more than anything in this sermon, I want to encourage you to follow your own sense of reverence. Follow the things that make your heart skip a beat, that make you feel hope and wonder, and express them in whatever way you have. Maybe in a few words here and there, maybe a song, maybe it's an interpretive dance or a new knitting pattern. I don't care. But when we have the courage to express our deep awareness of the world, something magical happens. The magic of music that reflects our own story is actually what got Carolyn into writing music in the first place. In the mid-1960s, she worked for our congregation in the Arlington Street Church in Boston. She was an office administrator there. And the student minister named Marnie Harmony invited Carolyn to put together some music for this worship service that was to be celebrating women. So Carolyn went about looking for music that related to women, music that was by women. But when she looked for songs written by women, she was appalled to find how little was available. So late one night, she sat at her piano and sang what she wanted to say to her 3 daughters that were asleep upstairs. That song became the hymn, become daughter. It was a turning point for her. It was the first time that she had sung from her own experience. And it gave her the moment of realizing what she was meant to do. In an interview with the UU World magazine, Carolyn said, "Writing my own song really was the beginning of finding my own way." She says, "I was a young woman activist. My children were young, and I had totally lost myself." Those are dramatic words. I had totally lost myself. I don't think they're unique words, though. All of us lose ourselves at least a few times. It can happen in the midst of minutia, caring for others, holding down a job, staying healthy, taking care of the house, maintaining friendships, and the daily commute. We can lose ourselves in a sea of daily tasks. Before we know it, we forget that we're passionate or curious, that we have this deep sense of longing. We can lose ourselves in the mundane, or we can lose ourselves in a time of crisis. Maybe it's battling cancer or an addiction or losing a job or the death of a spouse. Any of those major life shifts can pull us so far afield that we forget that something other than that immediate crisis is of deep importance to us. We lose ourselves from time to time, but naming aloud what's most sacred to us, naming aloud what we love, helps us reclaim our voice in a context that's a lot bigger than the immediate moment. It's great to sing the songs of other people and to read the words of other people. But tremendous power comes when we boldly put our own faith into our own words. Now, the song Spirit of Life was originally written in Carolyn's living room one night. It was deeply personal, and people love it so much that a minor controversy brewed in the 1990s. She had a minor conflict because these members of congregation loved the song so much that they started writing their own verses to it, adding to it. She says, "My feeling was you need to find your own melody. Don't lose what you want to sing, but find a way to make it yours." I said earlier that Spirit of Life is one of the most popular hymns, and we don't sing it all that often here at Tapestry, especially if you're newer here. You may not be as familiar with the song. I don't use it very much. But I hope to reintroduce it into our regular cycle, because there's something tremendously valuable about tradition, knowing something deep in your heart and being able to recite it. When we repeat a reading over and over, or a song over and over, it embeds itself in our subconscious. Just the other night, we were here at a discussion group talking about reverence, and I realized because the word reverence is part of the Scout law, I was able to say the whole thing just like that. They're words that I had not spoken aloud, certainly since the age of 18. But I could say them without a moment of hesitation. Fortunately, they're generally words that I agree with. Now, knowing words by heart can be so comforting. Just a few weeks ago, we had a couple visiting Tapestry for the first time. The woman, like myself, had grown up in a Unitarian Universalist congregation and had drifted through college and young adulthood, as happens a lot. But she said, when they started saying the unison affirmation, the love is the spirit of this congregation and service is the law, blah, 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 she immediately felt at home. because she had grown up saying those words in another congregation in another state. But saying them here at Tapestry made her feel at home. That's really powerful. Knowing things by heart is powerful, and it's a great tool to carry with us to explain our faith to other people. It's difficult to explain Unitarian Universalism. Believe me, I try to do it every Sunday, and it's exhausting. But having something like this that we can mention is a really great tool to explain it to people. The 7 principles are way too long, unless there are 1 or 2 that really, really resonate with you. The unison affirmation, though, is a pretty good place to start, and if you've been coming here regularly, you've probably memorized that one. And of course, the hymn, Spirit of Life, describes Unitarian Universalism in a stunningly poetic way. Tell someone that this is our version of prayer, and you have beautifully explained Unitarian Universalism. On November 1st, Tapestry is going to have its 20th birthday, which is pretty cool. So the following week, we are going to have Sharing Our Liberal Faith Sunday, where folks are invited to bring a friend to share what you love about Tapestry with a friend or family member. That's why I'm letting you know some of these tools that you can take with you to have that sometimes awkward conversation of what this is all about. So I want to spend the rest of the time talking a little bit about the actual content of this song. I realized as I was doing this that this could be a whole sermon series, but some of the things have to be mentioned. First is the opening words and the title of the hymn itself, Spirit of Life. We take that phrase for granted sometimes as Unitarian Universalists because we use it so much. It's used as a title for curricula. It's everywhere. But the phrase didn't exist until Carolyn McDade turned it into a hymn. It is such a perfect phrase for our diverse theology because it can be a great metaphor for God, or Spirit of Life can just as easily be a short way of describing the miracle of nature that creates a sense of awe and wonder in the world. It's that green sprouts cracking the pavement from that reading we heard earlier. From my perspective as a minister, whenever I'm asked to lead a prayer or meditation in a public setting, having that little phrase, Spirit of Life, as the object of our attention is a lifesaver. And the second line is lovely. Move in my heart all the stirrings of compassion. It's not a request to know something intellectually, or a request to be saved, or for anything to be materially changed. The request is to feel deeply. It asks the Spirit of Life to open my heart, change me, not my enemy or the situation. First, adjust my heart to start with compassion. Blow in the wind and rise in the sea. It evokes nature that's such a fundamental part of Unitarian Universalist spirituality. And it speaks of wind and water that flow effortlessly everywhere in the world, creeping into places even when they're not expected or wanted sometimes. Move in the hand, giving life the shape of justice. This to me is the most surprisingly complicated line in the song. Up until now, it's all been a personal request. Come to me, move my heart. But now we hear, move in the hand. Is it my hand? Is it your hand? Or perhaps all hands need to be moved toward justice. And I love giving life the shape of justice. It's a recognition of the interconnection of our lives. When one life takes the shape of justice, others do too. This isn't about an individual life, or the life of the privileged, or the life of the oppressed that need to be changed. Giving life the shape of justice recognizes that our lives are so deeply intertwined. Justice isn't about isolated actions. It's about a shape of the lives that we lead together. Roots hold me close, wings set me free. Now here sits our Unitarian Universalist tradition in the middle of this dichotomy. We honor the ancient truths of our Christian heritage, and we welcome new insights of generations of wise women and men. And even more, we know that more truth is coming in our future together. Spirit of Life is this incredibly poetic expression of our faith tradition, and the symbols resonate with meaning on so many different levels. It's unbelievable. But in the midst of all that poetry, the thing that's most striking to me about this song is the attention to balance that it brings. As it brings metaphors from wind and water, it reminds us to build lives in balance with nature. Framing justice as a lifestyle, it speaks of a balance of power between people, not revenge, but a balance of power. As UUs, we're constantly seeking balance between tradition and embracing new ways of understanding the world. And the song speaks of stirring the heart to move us to action. It reminds us that in our community, putting faith into action is where it's at, because one without the other is pretty darn useless. Balance, at least in this song and for our faith tradition, is never done. It's never static. As time passes, we constantly readjust, seeking to find a more perfect balance that incorporates more of creation. I guess what I'm trying to say is the journey of finding balance is one that's never complete. We're forever seeking more wholeness, forever seeking the Spirit of Life to come in and guide our hearts and actions toward a better way, and so the song ends. Spirit of Life, come to me, come to me.
We extinguish this flame, knowing the light remains in the warmth and compassion of our hearts until we are together again.